It was one of those early spring mornings that seemed to confuse the weather. The clouds hung low, the air smelled of wet asphalt, and a light drizzle turned the streets silver. In a quiet corner of the town, a place where tired buildings leaned on each other for support, something out of place sat quietly against a brick wall of the neighborhood veterinary clinic. A cardboard box. It wasn't a delivery box. It wasn't taped shut. Instead, it was sagging under the weight of moisture, softening at the edges and beginning to collapse slightly under the gentle, persistent rain. What stood out most was that the box wasn't empty. Inside, curled into a tight, trembling ball, was a tiny puppy. Barely 2 months old, his fur was matted with mud and his eyes, too big for his face, blinked slowly as if every movement cost him something. The small, fragile body was soaked, yet not a sound escaped him. Not a whimper, not a bark. He just sat there, eyes scanning every passerby with a quiet, desperate hope. Beside him was something almost more painful than the puppy himself. A single folded note, damp but still legible, clutched under the small weight of his paw. It had only 5 words scrawled in handwriting that was shaky and almost childlike. "Please love him. I'm sorry." That was all. No name, no explanation, no contact. Just those 5 haunting words. The first person to see the box was Mrs. Garland, the clinic's receptionist. She was arriving early, juggling her umbrella and keys when her eyes landed on the sad little structure by the door. Oh no," she whispered, already rushing forward. She dropped to her knees despite the wet sidewalk and leaned over the box. The puppy lifted his head ever so slightly and blinked at her. He didn't growl or cower, just looked. Mrs. Garland's voice trembled. "Sweetheart, what happened to you?" She scooped him gently out of the soggy box, cradling him to her chest like a newborn. His tiny heart beat like a hummingbird against her hand. He wasn't just wet, he was cold, dangerously cold. "Dr. Nolan," she called as she rushed inside. "We have an emergency." Dr. Nolan, a middle-aged man with years of experience, moved quickly, motioning her to the exam table. The puppy was placed gently down and immediately shivered. His paws were raw, suggesting he had walked a long way. His stomach was slightly sunken in, as though he hadn't eaten in days. But what tore at the most was his silence. No crying. No resistance. Just eyes filled with exhaustion, loss, and something too close to acceptance. As Dr. Nolan began the initial examination, Mrs. Garland handed him the damp note. He read it once, then again. His jaw tightened. "Who would do this, Mrs.?" Garland didn't respond. She simply brushed the puppy's fur back and whispered, "Someone who couldn't keep him, but still loved him." Over the next few hours, the puppy was dried, fed, and warmed. He was too weak to eat much, but he licked at the bowl with such gratitude it brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. They didn't know his name, didn't know his story, but already he was becoming something to them. More than just a stray, more than just an emergency. Later that afternoon, after the clinic posted about the puppy online, asking for help, maybe information, a woman came in with her daughter. The little girl, no more than 8, had seen the post and insisted they visit. As she approached the kennel where the puppy now lay, wrapped in a blanket, he looked up, and for the first time he wagged his tail. Just once. A small, hesitant flick, but it was enough to make the girl's eyes well up with tears. "Mom," she whispered, "can we keep him?" Her mother hesitated. "Sweetie, he might belong to someone, but they left a note," she replied. "They said, please love him. That's all they wanted. That's all I want too." The puppy rested his head on the edge of the kennel, still watching them, still silent. But something unspoken passed between him and the girl. Something old and raw and beautiful. A kind of recognition. Dr. Nolan walked over. "We have to wait a few days just in case someone comes forward. But if not, he'll need a home." The girl nodded, still gazing at him. "We'll wait. I'll visit him every day." And she did. Rain or shine, before and after school, she sat beside his kennel and read to him from her storybooks. She named him Lucky, even though nothing about his story so far had felt lucky. Because, she said, maybe everything bad already happened, and now the good stuff can begin. As the days passed, Lucky began to change. Slowly. He still didn't bark. He still flinched sometimes at sudden sounds. But he stopped hiding in corners. He ate with more energy. And when the girl arrived each day, his tail wagged longer and stronger. No one came forward to claim him, and part of Dr. Nolan felt like they never would. Whoever wrote that note, those 5 broken words, had made their choice. One born of love, but also of deep pain. Maybe they were escaping something. Maybe they had nothing left to give. But they gave what they could. A final chance for their dog, and a plea to the world. Please love him. When the mandatory hold period ended, Dr. Nolan made the call. The girl's family adopted him. She came with a collar and a new bed, grinning from ear to ear. As they walked Lucky out the door of the clinic for the last time, he paused at the entrance, just for a second. He looked back. Maybe he remembered the box. Maybe he remembered the cold. But then he looked forward, at her waiting hands, at the promise of a new story, and he took the step. The door clicked open slowly, and Lucky took his first step into his forever home. It was small but warm, with sunshine pouring in through windows dressed in lace curtains. The living room smelled faintly of cinnamon and something else. Something unfamiliar, but safe. His paws patted softly over the hardwood floor, every sound making his ears twitch. The little girl knelt at the threshold, her arms wide open, smiling as though the moment was too big for words. "Welcome home, Lucky," she whispered. Behind her, her mother and father exchanged a look, equal parts wonder and concern. Bringing a rescue dog into a family was never simple. But this dog, this silent, soulful-eyed puppy who had already endured more than most, didn't feel like a burden. He felt like a prayer. One answered. The girl, whose name was Ellie, led Lucky into the living room. A soft dog bed sat in the corner, flanked by toys, a bowl of clean water, and a small hand-painted sign that read, "Lucky's Corner." She had made it herself, with crooked letters and a big red heart underneath. "Do you like it?" she asked. Watching him closely, Lucky sniffed at the bed, his little tail wagging gently. Then he turned and nudged Ellie's knee with his nose. That was enough for her. She dropped to the floor and wrapped her arms around him gently, and though Lucky stiffened for a moment, perhaps remembering something, some old ghost, he didn't pull away. Slowly, he settled into her embrace, his head resting against her shoulder. It was the first time he had allowed himself to feel safe. The first time he had let someone in. Later that evening, after dinner and laughter and dozens of tail wags, Ellie brought Lucky into her room. It was painted light blue, with twinkle lights around the window and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She pointed to a pillow on the floor beside her bed. "That's where you sleep." "Okay." Lucky sat down, blinking at her. She bent down and stroked behind his ears. "Don't worry, I'll always be right here," and she was. That night, as rain began to tap gently against the window pane, Lucky lay on the soft pillow curled into a ball. He didn't shake. He didn't cry. For the first time, he slept through the night. Deep, dreamless sleep. A peace that had been denied to him for far too long. Days turned into weeks, and Lucky's transformation began to unfold like a slow bloom. His coat grew shinier, his ribs no longer showed, and most importantly, his eyes began to sparkle. Ellie and her family doted on him, and in return he gave them his quiet loyalty. He followed Ellie everywhere, whether it was the kitchen, the garden, or the front porch where she did her homework. He was her shadow, her guardian, her best friend. But Lucky was not a dog who barked. Not once, not even when a squirrel darted across the yard, or when the mailman knocked on the door. His silence wasn't stubborn. It was part of his story, a wound that hadn't healed yet. Still, Ellie never pushed him. She didn't need him to be loud or playful or brave. She only needed him to be there. One afternoon, as they sat together in the backyard, Ellie asked something softly. "Do you think whoever wrote the letter still thinks about you?" Lucky tilted his head. "I do," she said. "I think they miss you. I think it broke their heart." She often wondered who had left him. The note, "Please love him. I'm sorry," played in her mind like a song she couldn't forget. It didn't feel cruel. It felt desperate. Whoever had written those words hadn't given Lucky away because they didn't care. They had done it because they did. Ellie imagined a child maybe crying in the backseat of a car as they drove away, or a young mother with no home, placing the box down with trembling hands, or maybe even an older man too sick to take care of a pet anymore. Whoever it was, they hadn't abandoned Lucky. They had loved him the only way they knew how, by letting him go. One Saturday, Ellie and her mother took Lucky to the park. It was busy. Kids running, dogs barking, people chatting on benches. Lucky kept close to Ellie, his eyes darting, alert but not afraid. They sat under an old oak tree, and Ellie opened a book to read aloud, something she did often. The words came out soft and rhythmic, and Lucky lay beside her, soaking in the sound. Then something happened. A toddler nearby let go of a balloon. It soared into the air, and the child began to cry. Lucky's ears perked up, and for the first time a small sound came from him. A bark, just once, quiet, hoarse, as if he had forgotten how. Ellie's book dropped from her lap. She turned to him, stunned. "Lucky, did you just—" Another bark, louder this time. His tail thumped. He stood, watching the balloon with interest. Ellie's mother looked over wide-eyed, and then Ellie laughed. She laughed so hard she cried. "You did it, you found your voice." Lucky looked at her and barked again, joyful, bright, like a light turned on inside of him. That night, as they sat curled together on her bed, Ellie held his face in her hands. "You're not broken," she said. "You never were." And in response, Lucky licked her cheek and gave a quiet, content sigh. Later that week, a letter arrived at the clinic. It had no return address, just a typed message inside. "To whoever took him in, thank you. He was my whole world. I had no choice but to let him go. I lost my job, my home, everything. But not him. I wanted him to live. I wanted him to be loved. If he found a new life, please just let me know. Did he wag his tail again? Does he still sleep curled up? Is he safe? Thank you. Thank you." Mrs. Garland read it, hands trembling. She made a copy and called Ellie's mom. That evening, they read it together around the kitchen table. Ellie pressed the paper to her chest and whispered, "We have to write back." And they did. They told the stranger everything, about the soggy cardboard box, the sad eyes, the silence, and how slowly Lucky had become more than a rescue dog. He had become family. They included photos, one of Ellie and Lucky in the garden, another of him mid-bark, caught in mid-joy. They mailed it to the return P.O. box listed. They never got a reply, but that was okay. Some goodbyes don't need an answer. Some stories end not with words, but with love. The days grew longer, and spring unfolded across the little town like a love letter sealed in golden sunlight. Lucky had become a quiet fixture in Ellie's life, a presence that filled the quiet moments with warmth. The kind of dog who never needed to bark to be heard, who never needed to run to be felt. His mere nearness brought calm. But sometimes Ellie noticed it, the sadness. It never screamed. It didn't storm or strike like thunder. It lingered, quiet and persistent, like the chill left after a hard rain. Lucky would stare at the front door some mornings, his body still, ears tilted forward, as though expecting someone who never came. Other days, he'd carry his favorite toy to the porch and just sit, eyes on the road, waiting. One night, Ellie found him that way. The sky was ink dark, stars half hidden by drifting clouds. Lucky was curled up on the front, Matt chin resting on his paws. Ellie sat beside him barefoot, wrapped in a fuzzy blanket. "Are you missing someone?" she asked softly. He didn't move. She reached out and brushed her fingers across the top of his head. Do you think they're looking for you too? He let out a sigh, so deep it didn't sound like breath. It sounded like a memory. Ellie didn't say anything else. She just sat with him, two souls stitched together by the ache of a past they couldn't name. At school the next day, Ellie couldn't concentrate. Her thoughts kept wandering. When the teacher called on her, she stumbled over her answer, barely aware of the question. At lunch, her friends chattered about the latest online challenge, but Ellie just stirred her food, her eyes far away. Earth, to Ellie, one of them teased. She smiled weakly. Sorry, I didn't sleep well. In truth, she had dreamt of Lucky pacing by the door, whimpering as though his heart was cracking open. She woke up with tears on her face. After school, she rushed home. Lucky greeted her at the door, wagging his tail slowly the way he always did. But today something felt off. His tail wag lacked its usual rhythm. His eyes seemed duller. She dropped her backpack, crouched beside him. What's wrong? He leaned into her but didn't lick her face like he usually did. His head hung low, almost apologetic. Ellie knew. The past he had come from, it hadn't left him. It was still stitched into his bones. She couldn't erase it with treats or toys or warm beds. She couldn't love it away, no matter how much she tried. That night, after dinner, Ellie approached her parents. I want to find the person who wrote the letter. They looked at each other. Ellie, her mom said gently, we don't even know who it was. There was no name, no address, just that one typed note. But there was a P.O. box, Ellie insisted. They sent that message to the clinic. What if we wrote again? Her father looked concerned. Sweetheart, if they wanted to be found, they would have left more. Maybe they're not in a place to be contacted. Ellie's voice cracked. But what if they are? What if they're out there thinking he's still in a shelter? What if they're hurting every day, wondering if he's okay? Her mother's face softened. What would you want to say to them? Ellie didn't hesitate. That he's safe, that he's loved, that he matters. Her dad sighed and pulled her into a hug. We'll try. We'll write again. Over the next week, the family crafted a heartfelt letter. They included new photos of Lucky, one of him curled up at Ellie's feet while she read, another of him running through the park with his ears flying back like tiny sails. They described his gentle nature, his quiet loyalty, his slow, miraculous journey back to joy. Ellie added a line in her own handwriting. He still waits by the door sometimes. I think he's waiting for you, but don't worry, we're waiting with him now. They mailed it to the P.O. box again, sealing it with hope. Weeks passed. Nothing came. No envelope. No response. Just silence. And still, Lucky watched the road. One warm Sunday, they took Lucky on a road trip to a nearby hiking trail. Ellie thought the fresh air would lift his spirits. The sun dappled through the trees, and wildflowers lined the narrow paths. Birds chirped overhead, and Ellie laughed as she walked ahead, holding Lucky's leash. But then, a sharp yelp. Lucky stumbled, paw lifting awkwardly. Lucky! Ellie cried. He sat down, licking his paw, wincing. Her parents rushed over. He might have stepped on something sharp, her dad said, inspecting the paw. They carried him back to the car, gently and carefully. At the emergency vet, they learned it was a minor sprain. Just rest, the vet assured them. No running or jumping for a few days. But it wasn't the injury that broke Ellie's heart. It was the whimper Lucky let out when they tried to leave the vet's office. The same sound from her dream. The sound that said, please don't leave me here again. She knelt down, face close to his. We're not leaving you. Ever. He nuzzled into her shoulder, and in that moment she realized something. Lucky didn't just fear pain, he feared being forgotten, abandoned again, losing what he had just started to believe in. That night she wrote her own letter. No envelope, no stamp, just a folded page she placed in Lucky's toy box. Dear whoever you are, you didn't fail him. You saved him, He still misses you. But he loves us now too. We'll always tell him how brave he was, how much someone once loved him enough to let him go. I promise. He will never be alone again. Thank you. Love, Ellie. The letter Ellie had written, the one without a stamp or address, remained tucked away in Lucky's toy box, nestled between a frayed rope and the chewed corner of a stuffed bear. It wasn't meant to be mailed. It was meant to be kept. Like a secret, like a prayer. And every night when Ellie lay awake, listening to Lucky's soft breathing beside her bed, she imagined the words traveling out into the world anyway, like dandelion seeds on a breeze. But the real world moved forward, with or without answers. Lucky's sprained paw healed quickly, and within a week, he was limping less, hobbling across the living room with determination in his steps. Ellie and her parents took him on slow walks around the neighborhood, neighbors pausing to smile and comment on his progress. "He's a real fighter," Mrs. Dawson from across the street said. "You'd never know what he's been through." Ellie always smiled politely, but inside she knew the truth. What Lucky had been through was still very much with him. She could see it in the way he sometimes flinched at unexpected sounds, or the way his tail tucked when he was surprised. Pain like that didn't just vanish. It waited. It remembered. And then, one rainy afternoon, it returned. It began as a knock at the door. Ellie had just come home from school, her socks wet from puddles and her backpack soaked despite the umbrella. She had just unhooked Lucky's leash when the knock came again, 2 sharp taps hesitant. She peeked through the curtain and saw a man standing outside. He wasn't old, maybe in his late 20s, wearing a heavy gray hoodie and jeans stained with mud. His hair clung to his forehead from the rain, and he carried nothing but a faded envelope in his hand. "Mom?" Ellie called nervously. Her mother approached the door cautiously. "Yes? The man's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to intrude. I got your letter." Ellie's heart dropped. She moved beside her mom, staring up at him. "You're the one who left Lucky?" she asked. He looked at her, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion and guilt. "Yeah. His name wasn't Lucky then. It was Max." Her mother opened the door fully. "Come in out of the rain." He stepped inside slowly, unsure of his welcome. Lucky, who had been sitting behind Ellie, stood suddenly and sniffed the air. The moment he saw the man, his body stiffened. Then his ears perked up. A tiny, breathy whine escaped his throat. The man dropped to his knees. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Lucky took a step forward, then another. His head tilted slightly as though piecing together a dream. "Max," the man choked. "It's me. It's Chris." The dog bolted forward, nearly sliding on the floor, and buried his face into the man's chest, whining louder now, licking his chin and neck, tail wagging furiously. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. Her mom's eyes filled with tears. They watched as Lucky, no, Max, trembled with joy, overcome by the impossible reunion. Chris hugged him tightly. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Later, as the rain softened to a whisper outside, the 4 of them sat at the kitchen table. Lucky lay curled between Ellie's feet, calm and still, as though finally at peace. Chris sipped the tea her mom had offered, fingers trembling slightly as he held the mug. "I left Max at the shelter a year ago," he began. "I was living out of my car. I'd lost my job, my apartment, and everything. Max was all I had left, but I couldn't feed him anymore. I'd already skipped so many meals just to give him something." He paused. "I went to a no-kill shelter, but they said they were full. They wouldn't even take him in. I sat outside their door with him all night. Finally, I left him there with that note. I prayed someone would read it." Ellie wiped her eyes. "We did." Chris gave a broken smile. "I never stopped thinking about him. I wanted to go back, but by the time I got help from a support group and a job, I was too scared he was already gone. I kept checking the P.O. box every week. When your letter came, I broke down in the post office." He looked at her parents. "I'm not here to take him away, I swear. I needed to see he was okay." that I didn't destroy him by walking away. Ellie leaned forward. You didn't destroy him. You saved him. He never gave up on you. Chris's eyes shimmered. He was all I had. My mom died when I was 15. My dad was long gone. I got Max when I turned 18. He was my first real family. Ellie's mom reached across the table and touched his hand. You made the hardest choice a person could make, but you didn't abandon him. You gave him a chance. Chris swallowed hard. Thank you for everything. They all sat in silence. For a moment, the weight of what had just passed between them settling into the air like dust in a sunbeam. Chris visited several more times over the next few weeks. Lucky greeted him with joy each time, but never with desperation. His tail wagged when Chris arrived, but he always returned to Ellie, curling beside her feet or licking her hand like a promise. One Sunday afternoon, after tossing a tennis ball, around the backyard, Chris sat beside Ellie on the porch swing. You've given him something I couldn't, he said. Ellie looked at him. You gave him everything first, he remembers. Chris chuckled softly. Yeah, but you gave him hope again. He pulled something from his pocket, a dog tag on a silver chain. This was his. I kept it. I didn't want to forget him. He handed it to her. She turned it over in her hand. On one side it read, Max, if found, he's my whole world. She looked at him, eyes wide. You keep it, he said. You're his whole world now. Tears welled in Ellie's eyes. We both are. She stood, walked back inside, and hung the tag on Lucky's collar next to the new one they'd made. Now he carried both names, Max and Lucky, both lives, both families. All of it mattered. All of it made him whole. The first snow of the season came early that year. Tiny flurries danced on the wind like ash from a distant fire, silent and soft, blanketing the neighborhood in a hush that muffled every sound except the crunch of boots and the happy bark of a dog rediscovering winter. Ellie stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself as she watched Lucky, no, Max, chase his own footprints in the fresh snow. He wore a bright red scarf that matched the tips of Ellie's mittens. His tail wagged like it had its own heartbeat. He was stronger now, no sign of his injured paw. But more than that, he was confident. He no longer flinched at loud noises or turned his head at shadows. He'd begun to trust the world again, and in some small way, Ellie had too. Inside the house, the scent of cinnamon and pine drifted from the kitchen. Her mother was baking cookies, her father stringing lights on the tree, and Lucky, who had once slept on a bed of damp cardboard, now had his own embroidered blanket, his own stocking hanging above the fireplace, and a toy bin overflowing with chewed-up squeakers and half-gutted plushies. But the most precious thing he had wasn't a toy or treat. It was a family, one that had grown in the most unexpected way. Chris hadn't vanished. After their reunion, he kept returning, sometimes with stories, sometimes with groceries, and sometimes just to sit with Lucky in the grass. He was like a puzzle piece that hadn't fit before, but somehow slid perfectly into place now. He had started calling Ellie's parents Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, though they'd told him 100 times to use their first names. There was a tenderness between them, a quiet bond forged not through blood but through pain and shared healing. It was during one of those visits that Ellie got the idea. She'd been working on a school project about gratitude, writing a letter to someone who had made a difference in her life. While her classmates wrote to their teachers or siblings, Ellie sat staring at a blank page until it clicked. She would write back, not to Chris, but to the real author of the first letter, whoever had penned those simple 4 words, please love him. Whoever had kissed Max goodbye in the dark, heart shattered, and walked away. Even if it was Chris, even if he'd written it with trembling hands outside the shelter that night. Ellie believed the words had come from someplace deeper, from his heart, from the part of him that hoped someone out there would choose love. So she wrote, not for closure, but for connection. Dear stranger, we got your letter, the one you left with the puppy in the box. You didn't sign it, but I want you to know. We heard you. Every word, especially the ones you didn't write. His name is Lucky now, but I know he was Max to you. He's healthy. He's safe. He's deeply, wildly loved. When we first found him, he was shaking and broken and small. But even then, he looked at us with hope. That hope had to come from somewhere. I think it came from you. You gave him more than life. You gave him the courage to keep seeking love, even when it hurt. You did the right thing, even if it broke you. So, I'm writing this to say thank you. Thank you for loving him enough to let him go. Thank you for trusting the world to do the rest. We won't let him down, and we'll never let him forget where he came from. Love, Ellie, and Lucky. The letter was never mailed. She folded it neatly, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the hollow of a tree near the shelter where they had first found him. She left it there with a single red flower, just like the one Lucky had clutched in his mouth the day she met him. Maybe the wind would carry it. Maybe no one would ever find it. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the love it carried. On Christmas morning, the Gardners gathered in the living room in their pajamas, the fire crackling and the scent of cinnamon rolls filling the room. Presents were passed around, laughter filling every corner of the house. Lucky, Max, was the happiest of them all. He tore through wrapping paper like a child, barking with delight at every new toy, every treat. But the best gift came from Chris. He handed Ellie a small wrapped box. Inside was a framed photo, one taken just days ago in the park. Ellie, kneeling beside Lucky, arms wrapped around him. Chris had captured it in perfect light, the joy on both their faces glowing like sunrise. Beneath the photo, in cursive, he had written, "Not all broken things stay broken. Some are just waiting to be loved." Whole again. Ellie clutched it to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Chris smiled, voice cracking. "Thank you." That night, after the wrapping paper was cleared and the leftovers packed away, Ellie sat beside Lucky in front of the fire. He rested his head in her lap, eyes half closed, tail thumping slowly. "Do you remember?" she asked softly. His ears twitched. "Do you remember the box, the letter, the cold?" He opened his eyes. "I do," she said. "But it's okay now." She kissed the top of his head. "You're home." Lucky licked her hand, as if in agreement, as if to say, "I remember, but I forgive it all, because I found you." And outside the window, snow continued to fall, quiet and soft, like the closing of a chapter. A story that had begun with a box, a broken leg, and 4 trembling words. Please love him. They had, and they always would. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others who love dogs as much as you do. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming dog stories that will make you cry, smile, and believe in love again.